Now, Tom Dupri, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and partner at Gibson Dunn, who's been following the case. Thank you for being here. What do you make of the exchange between Trump's defense team right now and the judge? The judge telling Blanche, you are losing all credibility with the court. What does that indicate about his tolerance of violations of the gag order?
Well, it certainly indicates the judge takes these alleged violations very seriously. It also shows that the judge on day 2 of what promises to be a 6-week trial already has serious doubts about the credibility of Trump's lawyers. I mean, if you're a lawyer and defending a client, you don't want to hear the judge say that I think you've lost all credibility before the court. So I think that the Trump defense team is going to have to think about whether they need to recalibrate their arguments to this judge, because they are clearly not persuading him. When they tried to tell the judge that the former president had every intention of complying with the gag order, the judge simply wasn't buying it.
To keep this trial on the tracks, might the judge also change the parameters of the order so that we're not still sitting here months and months from now, delayed by some of the hearings as we're seeing today?
I think what you're going to see is the judge kind of amping up the gag order a little bit after today's proceedings. I think it would be going too far, and the prosecutors weren't requesting that he order President Trump be held in jail. I think what we're likelier to see is the judge giving the former president a very stern warning, possibly modifying the terms of the gag order to make abundantly clear what the former president can and cannot say, and just reminding the president that this is very, very serious, that the judge wants to maintain the integrity of this trial. He doesn't want witnesses to be threatened. He doesn't want members of the court or prosecutors to be threatened, and really try to lay down the law and lay down some guardrails to ensure that, as you said, this doesn't become a recurring theme where we have contempt hearings beginning every morning of the trial for the next 6 weeks.
Right. I mean, we'll be here forever if we continue to talk about contempt and don't get to the matter at hand. The impact on the jury, are they present at all, Tom, for this hearing on the gag order?
I think the jury's basically been kept, and they've been kept isolated, I think, from a lot of this. These are arguments that are typically carried out just with the lawyers in front of the judge, and the public can sit in and watch the proceedings, but the jury's not really privy to it. In fact, I think the judge probably wants to keep the jury isolated and independent of kind of all these, so-called side proceedings about what the former president is or is not saying outside the courtroom. And the judge wants to make sure that the jury keeps its focus on the evidence, the trial testimony, the documents that are going to come into this case, and they don't get distracted or sidetracked by extrajudicial statements, that is, statements that are made outside the confines of the courtroom.
How significant is it that the judge ruled Monday prosecutors can bring up several civil lawsuits involving Trump if he chooses to testify? Is it prudent for him to take the stand given that risk?
Well, look, this was a significant win, I think, for the prosecutors. No getting around it. Whenever a defendant takes a stand, the criminal defendant takes a stand in a case, it presents huge amounts of risk. For one thing, it can do what lawyers call open the door to questioning on all sorts of areas about other convictions, other legal proceedings, other court findings against Trump, which otherwise wouldn't come into the case. The other danger, of course, is that you open the defendant up to cross-examination. So if the defense team were to put former President Trump on the stand, yes, it would give him a chance to tell his version of events, but keep in mind that would also give the prosecutors the opportunity to cross-examine the former president, question him under oath, poke holes in his story, confront him with documents and evidence and the like. So it's a high-risk, high-reward endeavor if they do decide to try to call former President Trump to the stand here.
He's already indicated he'd like to be in that hot seat and tell his side of the story. David Pecker is the first witness up in the case. Are you surprised by the strategy behind that it wasn't Michael Cohen? And what might be the calculation here?
It doesn't surprise me, frankly, because I think the prosecutor's calculation here is that it would be a little risky beginning their case with Michael Cohen. We all know Michael Cohen is not the most reliable of witnesses. And so I think what the prosecutors want to do is tell their story through witnesses other than Michael Cohen, at least at the beginning. They want to call David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, to really frame the case, to set the stage, to lay the table for the jury to understand and put in context all the evidence that's going to follow. I think we will see Michael Cohen, but at a later point in the trial, once the prosecutors have already begun putting in evidence, telling their story through other witnesses, that's where they bring in Michael Cohen, rather than making Michael Cohen the focal point of this trial from day one.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.